Hi, in today's video, we're going to prove Euclid's lemma. It is one of the rare proofs in mathematics that anybody can follow. It is beautifully simple. But there's one problem with Euclid's lemma. If you look it up, there's no way that you can find Euclid's lemma without Bézout's identity. So Bézout lived in 1800s and Euclid lived in 300 BC. And the proof looks the way we do it today. It looks very modern, very abstract. That's not how the ancients would have done it, right? Because as Aristotle said, first we know the most knowables with senses, and then the goal of science is to move away from that sense-wise knowable things to the most abstract. And that's where we are today. I think Euclid would be very pleased to see what we've done with his algorithm. Okay, so in this video, you will understand why it's called Euclid's lemma, even though it uses Bézout's identity. Inevitably, there's no other way to prove Euclid's lemma. But why it's given Euclid's name, and that it is actually quite fair that it is. So you probably have used Euclid's lemma. Towards the end of the video, I'll show you where you would have used it, but most likely the proof hasn't crossed your desk, because it hadn't crossed my desk for quite some time. So here we go, setting the record straight. We will start with Euclid's algorithm. This is how he would have thought of this, okay? So for Euclid, number was a length. So you give me a number like 12, and I'm thinking of it being a length and being a ruler. Euclid's algorithm has to do with greatest common divisor of two numbers, where Euclid's lemma has to do with a prime number dividing a composite number. And then it has to necessarily divide one of the components that made up that composite number. Okay, so there's a little bit of a gap. Why is something to do with greatest common divisor have to do anything with prime number dividing composite and it having to divide both of the components of that composite number? And you will see that jump using Bézout's identity very well in this video. So his thinking is about division is, again, he's thinking of numbers as length. So when he's thinking about a division, he's thinking about how many times can I fit, let's say that this is 3 and this is 12. Let's say this is maybe 5, so it doesn't evenly fit here. So this is a smaller number. So how many times can I fit this in here? Okay, that's twice. Okay, that's not 3 times. So twice, and then I have something left over. So that's going to be a remainder that's not 0. And if I get a remainder that's not 0, this is what the algorithm says. If I get the remainder that's not 0, I iterate this process again. And this algorithm was so commonly, this iterative algorithm was so commonly followed by the Greeks that it was given its own name, antipeiresis. Okay, so a larger number without loss of generality, A is strictly greater than B from our setup. So we're talking about definitely greater number, smaller number, and how many whole times does it fit into that? And if R is 0, you stop there, and the greatest common divisor is B. And if you keep doing this forever and you never get the remainder to be 0, then you realize that you're working with two numbers that are coprime or relatively prime. So those coprime means that they don't have to be, those two numbers don't have to be prime on their own when they're alone out and about in the world. Like, for example, 20 and 21 are coprime, but neither of them are prime on their own, right? Because their greatest common divisor is 1. So, but if you do find that R to be 0, then you stop. But if you have to iterate, you obviously have to swap out A with B and then B with R. So we're going to actually do this algorithm the way that Euclid would have done it. The choice I made was of two numbers was 48 and 18. So the question is, what is the common divisor of 48 and 18? Okay, let's pretend we don't know, and then we'll figure it out way that Euclid would have thought of it. So how many times can I fit 18 or stick or ruler that has length 18 in 48? And that's only twice. And then let's see what I have left over. It's not 0, it's 12. So I have to do this process again. Then how many times does 12 fit into 18? And that's only once, and I have a remainder of 6. Remainder of 6 is not 0, and I have to iterate that again. And 6 fits into 12 exactly twice, nothing left over, so I stop there. The greatest common divisor then is 6. That's how we find it. So let's write down what we just followed. So the two numbers that I chose was, the larger number was 48 and the smaller number was 18. And 18 fits into 48 2 times, and then there was 12 left over. 12 is not 0, so 18 becomes our new A, and 12 becomes our new B. And then 12 fits into 18 once, and then we have 6 left over. Still not 0. 12 becomes our new A, 6 becomes our new B. That's exactly twice, remainder 0, and we're done. Okay? So this is what we just did Euclid's algorithm, okay? Now, I will show you that Bézout's identity is nothing but running Euclid's algorithm backwards, okay? And interestingly, Bézout, this is Bézout's identity. This is what we have discovered. Proved this identity, proved this theorem for polynomials. And in partial fraction decomposition, when you are sure that that type of an ax divided by some expression, right, times some b that you're looking for, let's say x plus 2, that you're sure that such ax and bx exist and the task is just to find it, you're sure because of Bézout's identity. That assurance comes from this, that there must exist such a function that when you multiply them, you will get greatest common divisor. So these would be polynomials. Here, it works for numbers as well. So we're going to run this Euclid's algorithm. This is what we just did backwards. So we finished at 6, and then we will start Bézout identity with that. So here we go. 6 is our starting point. And 6 equals to, from this expression, 18 minus 1 times 12. Okay, so we'll just copy paste that 18 and then minus 1. And instead of 12, I will get my 12 from this expression. So that's 48 minus 2 times 18. Okay, and if you FOIL that, you will get negative 1 times 48 plus 3 times 18. Okay, negative 1 is your m, and 3 is your n. Okay, so think about this here. If you wrote this equation, this has integer solution. But if you wrote it to equal 1, then that does not have a solution in integers, right? So this is what we actually just found. X is our m, and that was negative 1, and then y is our 3. Okay, so that was Bézout's identity. And as you can see, it is very much related to Euclid's algorithm. Now we are ready to do the actual proof of Euclid's lemma. So Euclid's lemma says this: if p is prime and p divides a times b, some composite number, it can be 6, it can be 21, or whatever you want, then p divides a or p divides b. Okay, so if you took 6 divides 12 and 6 doesn't divide 4 or 6 doesn't divide 3, it breaks because 6 is not prime. So you have to work with prime, okay? And also, like, if you took like 3 divides 10, then 3 doesn't divide 5, or 3 doesn't divide 5, it's because 3 doesn't divide 10 composite number. So we're saying that p is prime and that p divides that composite number. Okay? Then p divides a, or we're not demanding that it divide both, just one of them. A or p divides b. Okay? So we will assume p is prime and p divides ab, and then if p divides a, we're done, because if one of them is satisfied, we're done. So we will look at the situation where p doesn't divide a, and hope to show that P does divide B. And that would be in this example, this case, okay? So let's say that my A is 3 and my B is 7. So this case would be P divides A, done. And this case, if I chose 7 to be my prime, 7 doesn't divide A, and I'm hoping to show that 7 divides B, right? So that's where we're at. Now, what can we say about P doesn't divide A? What does that mean? That means that I'm gonna have to say some claim about their greatest common divisor, because obviously I need Bézout identity next. So P and A. That equals, let's talk about it. So P is a prime number. We know a full list of its divisors. It can be 1 or itself P, or -1 or negative P. But we're talking about greatest common divisors, and those wouldn't even make the cut. So I won't consider them. So it could be P itself. But anytime the greatest common divisor is P itself, you're dealing with a situation like this, where 3 is the greatest common divisor, but then in that case, P divides A. And we said that P doesn't divide A. And in that scenario, you have this sort of situation, it's always 1. Okay, so that's the only possible option there. Now, I have greatest common divisor between two numbers. So I can write down Bézout's identity and say that there must exist some m, which is an integer, multiply that P by, and then add some other integer, n times A, and that has to give me their greatest common divisor. In this case, that happens to be 1. Okay, so let's remember what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to prove that P divides B, so it would be useful to have B somewhere, right? So I will multiply everything by B. That seems like a logical thing to do, and hope for the best after that. Okay, now, there is this fact of life that if a number divides two things, then that number divides the sum of those two things. Okay, like if a number, let's say 3 divides 9, right? And then 3 also divides 27. And then 3 divides their sum, 36, right? And it works for other numbers as well. So if I can prove that P divides this first expression, and I can prove that P divides the second expression, then I'm done. It divides the whole sum, which is equals to B. So P divides B times MP necessarily, because P is one of the factors. That's easy. Then P also divides Bn times A, because we said it initially that P divides A times B. And B times N times A is N times AB, right? So then it divides both of those things. Then P divides their sum, which happens to be B. Therefore, P divides B. Done. That is how you prove Euclid's lemma. This is why Bézout's identity is so important and you can't do without it. And this is why it's given Euclid's name and not Bézout's name also. And apart from calculus 2, partial fraction decomposition, there's another place where you have explicitly used Euclid's lemma. If you've taken intermediate analysis in the chapter about completeness axiom, you probably have done a proof of square root of 2 is irrational, or square root of any other prime number is irrational. In Abbott's book or in Lay's book in analysis, in this book it's on page 118, this proof, and it doesn't say that it used Euclid's lemma, but it did, because this jump right here, P divides A square, some number square, P is prime. Therefore, you say then P divides A. Why? Why is if some number divides a squared number, then it has to divide that number without square. It's not that obvious. It's using Euclid's lemma to make that jump. And in that case, it's a specific type of Euclid's lemma where A and B are the same, so it's A times A. And according to Euclid's lemma, P divides A times A, then P divides A, or P divides A. Therefore, P divides A. And then you use that lemma again in the same way for B in the second time. And that's the whole engine of that proof of a prime number square is irrational. So Euclid's lemma gets used there, but rarely in neither of the books is Euclid's lemma part of that chapter, for a good reason, because it would kind of be going on a tangent. So I understand why it's not there. Anyway, hopefully this was helpful and fun. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.